Dr. Fabio Masi, he accepted to be in this podcast. This podcast is an activity conducted within the Horizon 2020 NICE project, which focuses on wastewater treatment NbS for a more circular wastewater management. Fabio, he is a research, development, and innovation manager of the company of IRIDRA, but he is also a former chair of the International Water Association, IWA, and he has a long trajectory working on consultancy service on this field, not only in Europe, but in all continents. So with such a long and impressive experience, we are more than glad to have him here. And Fabio, I will start my question on tackling on the training needs. Also from the side of IWA, I know that there is a new working group in the IWA, and we see the necessity of spreading knowledge that is currently in a shape of a book or in a guideline to broader audience, to reach out those professionals and students that need to know more about water treatment NbS. So please, Fabio, the ground is yours.
Thank you, Carmen, and thank you for inviting me to this broadcast. Just talking about the IWA experience, what is going on at the moment is that there is this working group on nature-based solutions, which is already trying to merge the specialists of different specialist groups. There are 50 of them in the IWA, and a lot of them can be really linked to NbS or NbS applications for different purposes. And so what we are trying to do is just to go out from the simple application of nature-based solutions for water pollution control, which is what the wetlands, the constructed wetlands group has as main skill. And we are trying to open it to other sectors, like, for instance, the stormwater management, the recycle and reuse of wastewater, and so on. So the working group has just the aim for the moment as the very first mission to improve the impact of the knowledge dissemination at worldwide level towards nature-based solutions. And one of the main problems that we have seen in the years is that this kind of education is starting to lack already at the secondary level of education, so universities and so on. And so one of the very good products that have been developed by the wetland specialist group and then the not existing anymore task group on the nature-based solution has been to work on books that can really work fine as university texts. So they are books which are just built up and aimed to educate university students from different disciplines. And I want to stress the fact that the more disciplines are involved in the NbS design, the better. So really a lot of faculties should look at these books, which are freely downloadable. There are PDFs which are not easy to be found, but they are there. So you just have to work a bit for finding them. And they are freely downloadable. They will be forever freely downloadable. And they are really the good references that we have at the moment for defining some main assumptions in the design that can avoid failures. Failures have been one issue in my 30 years of story, for instance. And you really have to minimize the number of them in order to get a very good widespread of the technology. So spreading knowledge about how to do things in the best way for what we know at the moment. The research is still going on a lot. We are publishing really thousands of papers per year in these last years. So lot to discover yet. but we already know a lot. There are decades of story about this kind of technologies. And so instead of starting from the scratch, we just have to diffuse as much as possible what we have got in the last decades. And we are doing that quite efficiently as a scientific community worldwide. And so with all this, we hope that the adoption of the technology will be wider, having more people educated to it.
Thank you, Fabio. We see this as a never-ending discussion. Uh, Myself, I see ICLEI needs really to streamline on educating based on the work that is already there, but not by creating new one, because we do have excellent guidelines and books, as such as the ones you are mentioning to us, produced within the EWA. But the main thing now is how to translate this to decision makers, to utilities, to practitioners who need to have the basic knowledge because they didn't acquire it during the education phase. So it's as you said, we see the deficiency of the knowledge gaps permeating throughout the entire spectrum, not only the professionals, also higher education, and even in the secondary school, where I agree with you, NbS should already be a basic part of knowledge. Now I wanna move into a second question. This is more about looking at your long trajectory in this field. I guess it was not easy at the beginning. I want you to tell us briefly, if possible, which it's complicated, I guess, which were the main stepping stones in integrating water treatment NbS in the new projects.
Yep. So being very short, because it's really 30 years of story, so it's not so easy to be short, but if we want to focus on just a few main items, and the first one that I have learned on my skin in this long period is that if the technology you are proposing is never mentioned in any regulation at the regional or national level in the country you are operating, it's quite difficult to get it accepted, especially from the public authorities that have to release the permissions for the realization. So the best way for dealing with this is to start normally by research and demonstration projects, so funded projects by like the European Community or other banks in the planet that are then used as references. So at the first, you start with these already industrial scale realizations that can be monitored, that can be demonstrated in their efficiency, in the positive business models that they can provide. And then you use them as real scale references when you have to convince other technicians and mainly the politicians that have to decide how to implement the new regulations. And it is exactly at the moment in which you get the technology accepted and written down in a regional or a national regulation, then you see immediately after exponential growth in the number of realization in that country. And that's the first point.
I recall of a story that you told me recently of how it increased exponentially the number of applications of water treatment NbS once in Italy the European directive was adopted for implementing appropriate treatment of areas of population equivalent of 2,000 or less.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
This could be a good example of how legislation can be key, right?
Yeah. That happened in 99. And so it's already 25 years. And before 99, we had less than 10 full-scale realization of constructed wetlands in all Italy. And some of them, or most of them, were still considered as a pilot research application, let's say. A few of them even failed badly, and so they were even giving negative, how to say, impact to the perception of the goodness of the technology. And then since 99, when we got written down in the list of appropriate technologies, constructed wetlands for treatment below 2000 PE, then we had observed a growth curve which was straightly exponential. Now we have more than 1,000 in all Italy.
Well, at the beginning of the first generation of green infrastructure, we had to learn a lot by doing. I guess it was not that easy to convince the others, but now we have more sophisticated systems. So it's more easy to convince. Now we jump into the second reason.
Yeah. So the first one was normative. The second one is exactly the business model.
Business model, exactly.
Yeah. Also here, what you have to demonstrate is normally that the sum of the investment cost, the capex, and then the operation and management cost, the opex. If you make the sum with the capex, which is just one, is what you pay when you install the system, and then the opex that you normally calculate for a period of 25, 30 years of operation of the system. And then you have to compare this in between different alternatives. And you have to demonstrate that your green infrastructures, mainly because of the much lower operation and management cost in comparison to all other technologies, conventional technologies, are more convenient. And then those are the more economically convenient application that you can have when you make an analysis of different alternatives. So very often for our clients, we do this multi-criteria assessment analysis. And in this multi-criteria, obviously the economic one is one of the most relevant. So it's exactly the histogram that the stakeholders then are looking at all the time. And when you get that the NbS is the more convenient, then the choice is done and you get success. And for helping in this, luckily in the last 5 years, the economists are helping us a lot because they are getting methods for calculating, for instance, what is the natural capital and what is exactly the shadow price, which is related to the ecosystem services that the green infrastructure can provide. And obviously, a green infrastructure, if well designed, having multiple targets in your mind, can provide just not one ecosystem service as a concrete sewer can do to convey the water somewhere else. No, they can provide multiple functions, and those multiple functions have all of them a hidden value that is not hidden anymore, and then it can be added in the calculations, and you can try to demonstrate by this what is really in the long term the most valuable approach that you can choose.
So let's say that the current economical feasibility studies being applied could even be more and more improved, right? I remember going to a wet pond that when was dry became an amphitheater for spectacles, and that gives revenue for the city. We are using a device 24 hours, 7 days of a week, and it's not just for water related aspects, but also for social amenities, etc. So how can we monetize this and show it to convince our stakeholders, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You also mentioned to me about the public-private partnership systems. Do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, well, that can be an issue for the moment for some of the technology which are which are still in a startup phase, let's say. So I can make the examples of green walls for recycling the grey water. For the moment, their cost is still high enough, let's say, for making the investment by privates very rare. And why I'm saying this? Because if a family has to invest a few thousands euro for installing a device which is able to recycle, let's say, the 50% of the water they are producing in the apartment as a wastewater, discharging it, saving and reusing inside the apartment itself. So that can bring easily to a 30% of the reduction of the water bill since the day after you are making your installation. But if the politically mediated tariff of the water, country by country, is low enough for making this saving, producing a payback time which is longer than 1 decade, let's say sometimes 15 years, 18 years, for getting the capex, the investment cost paid back, even though you can really have very few expenses in terms of operation and maintenance, which are obviously elongating the payback time, then these numbers are still not attractive at all for the public-private partnership. And the private part is just keeping away. And so how to help this? We have to create competition, most probably in the free market, in order to get the components, for instance, of these green walls, which are not complex materials. And really circular economy could help a lot in lowering the price. But we need inventors, we need investors, we need testers and so on of the new materials, of the new configurations, in order to low down the price, the investment cost. And that's a way for then providing, let's say, a more widespread adoption of the free market. But at the beginning, we need really to convince people that the technology is working fine, that the promised numbers are exactly the ones we are telling, and so on. And for doing this, the only way I personally see is that we could have a political subsidizing of this kind of interventions, as it happened at the end for the photovoltaic. The photovoltaic in a lot of countries has been subsidized a lot in a first phase, and now the cost of the installation is really went down a lot. And most probably, now there is the right condition for having a real free market with a lot of adoption, as it seems to be, at least in Europe. And those are the numbers that we have at the moment.
It's a natural evolution of trying something new.
That could happen exactly in the same way for the water, which is even, it's a resource which is very important as energy is. I mean, energy is not a resource, but in terms of value on the market, we should consider that kind of very limited resource with the same importance. As we did for the photovoltaic, we should do exactly the same and convince our politicians to provide funds for that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, this is a very, very important message, and we need to take this into account just as a starting point, and then when we become more creative and more accepted with our creativeness as well, we can make this to work by itself without those incentives. Okay, Fabio, thanks a lot. Is there anything else, or should we close here maybe this podcast?
Well, I would say that I always try to encourage the young generations like you, like a lot of young colleagues that we are meeting around the planet, to really focus their attention on nature-based solutions, because still we are a few hundred specialists in the world. And if you look at the numbers, like, I don't know, the untreated wastewater, which is still untreated at planetary level, the possibilities, the theoretical possibilities to have really all these kind of devices which are aimed to save the water and to recycle and reuse it as it should be, so widespread that we could really reach the level of the personal computers, which are nowadays in every house, then these markets are big. At the planetary level, we are really talking about big numbers, and so we need much more forces to manage this
Yeah.
kind of
Let's
skills. Yeah,
multiplicate this 100 by 10, right?
even more,
Okay.
even by thousand.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or if, oh my God. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Um, we are trying to work on this with Urban by Nature. This is a platform that provides knowledge, and we are trying to do so through NICE. For anybody seeing this podcast, please go to check our webinars. Fabio Masi was one of our great speakers talking about the application of green walls. And we want to go beyond these projects in trying to reach out a broader audience and spread knowledge. So, yeah, thank you, Fabio, for your time.
Welcome, Carmen.
And bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.